Welcome to the Thrive From Within podcast, where personal transformation meets functional nutrition, mindfulness, and purposeful action. I'm Dr. Alexandro, and this is where we explore how to align, thrive, and become more from within. Well, welcome back. Admittedly, it's been a little while. Life has been a little bit full for me lately. I will say that. I do have a plan to start a 3-part mini-series that is going to dive into how various things can impact our health on a foundational level. And we will start with diving into food and how some of our modern day agricultural practices are really hampering our body's ability to absorb nutrients like they once did. We will then go into how our environment in regards to air quality, and then we will wrap up in water quality, but how each of those environmental impacts also is showing up and impacting your health in ways that most of us likely are not aware of. So that is the where we are going and a series that is going to be starting. But this conversation, I felt like this needed to come through first. Before we talk about what's depleting us, let's talk about what's actually holding us steady. The systems that we have in place that actually allow us to return to life when things get super loud. And it's one of my favorite quotes from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And having systems in place, I think, are one of the cornerstones on being able to come back, what I refer to as home, coming back to your center, coming back to your place, your presence. So that is what I want this episode to be about before we start unpacking all the things that maybe are not serving us in our health. Let's get into the one thing for me that I feel really anchors me through hard times in life. And that is something that I refer to as anchoring. And you go, well, what the heck is this anchoring? Anchoring is actually how I start my day with intention. It's not about productivity. It's about presence. It's how I regulate my nervous system before the world starts pulling on me from every direction possible. And when I don't use the anchoring technique, I end up drifting. I end up feeling it in my energy. I for sure feel it in my mind because I feel like there's no direction. I'm all over the place. Those are the days that I often find I'm not getting done the things that I wanted to get done. And it even shows up in our digestion. I mean, how many of us have gone through the day unintentionally? And before you know it, it's 2:00. We've not had anything at all to eat or drink. And we wonder why we feel like crap and we've got brain fog and all these things. So having this ability to create this space and this ritual is, for me, really what anchoring has come down to. It allows me to set the deck in my favor, so to speak, for the day ahead so that I have the best chance of showing up as the best version of myself for that day. It's not necessarily about a morning routine. Let me just get that out of the way, although it ends up being a huge part of my morning routine for sure. But more than that, like I've said, it really is about having something that I can always come back to center and come back to home base for. So that is the high level on that. And anchoring essentially works this way. You end up finding one thing, one event, one habit, one ritual that is the cornerstone. That's the anchoring point. And then from there, it's how many different other tasks or events or micro rituals can you attach off of that main event? And for me, that anchor in my day is actually the infrared sauna. Without going deep into how the infrared sauna shows up and all of the health benefits from it, which have been huge, that is the anchor. Because for me, this is what the morning looks like. I wake up. There was a point in time that I was one of those individuals that would say, yep, like I totally function and thrive on 5 hours of sleep. And I worked really hard for an extended period of time to try to increase 5 to 6. And I remember when I hit 6 hours, I thought, holy cow, it's not going to get any better than this. Like 6 hours is amazing. And at that time, I had a healthcare practitioner that I was working with who said, you really should shoot for 7 and see what happens. And I remember saying to her very clearly, I don't think that day is ever going to come that I'm going to hit 7 hours of sleep. I'm just not built that way. I'm not wired that way. And these are the kinds of things that I think people say when they truly believe in their own principles, because that's the way that it's always been. And I've been writing a lot about this lately, ironically, as I just think out loud recording this. But we end up telling ourselves these stories and creating these stories that when they're on repeat so frequently, we actually start to believe them. And that becomes our new norm. And for a lot of people, the norm of having brain fog or not having enough energy or only being able to sleep 5 hours, that's what we call that normal. And totally forget that, no, that's called feeling like shit. And you actually can do things to reset that starting point of normal. And sleep was that. So here I am, fast forward. Now I get 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep. And I'm telling you right now, I believe that sleep is one of the most underrated health hacks out there, and getting quality sleep. Figure out how to track it, figure out how to modify your environment, both externally and internally. But sleep is profound. And maybe at some point in the future, I'll do an episode on sleep and the importance of that and how it shows up and how we can really improve our daily ability to show up as the best version of ourselves just by taking the time and the effort and the energy to improve our sleep. So I will start my day first thing in the morning. I go for my first run of supplements, which frankly is one of the pieces that I'm going to point out in this episode, which is a custom blend. So it is specifically made for me on where my health is at this moment in time. And I'm taking feedback from doing HTMA analysis that's going to give me a good baseline of where I'm at in my current mineral status, but it's also showing me where I'm at in my toxic load, what things are in my environment that are actually inhibiting the best overall health that I can experience. So from all that information, from knowing some of my DNA issues and SNPs, so like I have a histamine intolerance, so that I know that there's certain things that my body just does not have the ability to either make or to deal with. So I've got to bring them in from an outside source, which I'll dive more into that in the series that's going to be coming up, because I think that unfortunately it's the real world that we live in, but our soils are so depleted from nutrients that honestly, most, if not everybody, probably needs to have some kind of supplementation in their life these days. Because if you think that you are eating this amazing, clean, super healthy diet, great, you probably are, but you're still also probably undernourished because we just don't have the actual raw materials for creating health from the produce and the food sources that we once did. So anyway, I'll save that for a future episode, but anchoring back to that squirrel moment. We all have squirrel moments, and there's my squirrel moment. So I'll start my day with my blend. I use a powder, so it goes into water. I mix it up into a glass and take it down, 8 ounces of water. I'm off to the races. Before I actually get into the sauna, another one of my favorite daily hacks to really keep me grounded in focus is using hydrogenated water. I will fill up my bottle or my flask and I will take that into the sauna with me. I run a 20-minute charge on it, which ends up giving me a very high dose of hydrogen water. And now I'm good. I'm in the sauna. I've already been extra nourished through minerals because I'm going to sweat in the sweat box. That's for sure. That's one of the beauties about it, is that it's a great detox mechanism. One of the best that we actually have access to, frankly. So into the sauna, I've got my water with me, and I use that time, generally it's a 30-minute session, for deep reflection. And that often, and it's not even often, it's always, frankly, it will show up for me in doing some kind of study in a spiritual space. And you probably have heard me say before, but for me, that spiritual space is Kabbalah these days. So that is where I do kind of my daily studies and my daily meditation, my daily prayer around that topic and those topics in my life and spirituality. And then from there, I'm coming back in. I will grab one of my morning green juices, which leads me to the next tool, I suppose, that helps me really stack the day going forward. And that is a cold press juicer. This is one of the kitchen tools that I absolutely feel has made a massive life-changing experience for me. I got into the juicing space in a roundabout way. A couple of years ago, I'm working with another practitioner trying to figure out what's going on and let's get some answers. And he was one of the very few who actually took blood pressure on our first visit. And after taking my blood pressure, he said, "Hey, like, you test often, or you monitor your blood pressure on your own often?" And I said, "Nah, not so much." And he said, "I'm pretty sure you have high blood pressure," which to me was massively alarming because if you know me, I had this ridiculously clean diet, eat uber healthy, work out like not a madman, but in appropriate levels, but very religiously. And it just did not make any sense to me whatsoever. So I ended up getting a new blood pressure cuff. And sure enough, for that next week, I'm tracking my blood pressure and I'm going, holy crap, I actually think I have high blood pressure. You got to be kidding me. So I go back for follow up with this practitioner and he tests again and he says, "Yeah, you actually have high blood pressure." And I thought, holy crap, how is this possible? Where that left me was figuring out, okay, this is what I do is work with chronic disease using diet and lifestyle. So let me go into this space and figure out something I can do there. I ended up putting together this recipe for a green juice, and I'll share this with you, but understand, I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to be an experience that you would have per se, but it is the impact that it had on me. And within a 9-day window, I dropped my blood pressure substantially, like more than medicine could for sure. And the only thing that changed was me using a morning green juice. So that was 2 years ago, and I consume that green juice still on a mostly daily basis. I am usually 5-6 days a week using that green juice. The first 8 months being unsure, one, if it was going to have any impact, two, if I was going to be consistent with this, and three, not wanting to spend the money on a quality juicer. I spent the first 8 months with a nut milk bag, and every morning I would wake up and I would put the vegetables into the Vitamix. I'd do it on low because the Vitamix actually does create heat, but more than that, it oxygenates the crap out of whatever it is that you put into it. Again, another story for another day. And I would then pour this into the nut milk bag and I would just sit there and I would literally just wring it as much as I possibly could to extract the juice. And I did that 5-6 days a week for 8 months. No joke. When I saw the difference that it made, I very quickly said, okay, I probably at some point need to consider picking up a juicer. And I eventually did. It's been 2 years. I use that thing on a weekly basis. I'll batch juice and then have it for the rest of the week. And there's different recipes I've come up with. There's different family recipes that we've used for things, especially in cold seasons and things like this. It's become a cornerstone for sure. Now, another piece that I think is worth mentioning that goes into that is actually storing this, right? So here I am in the sauna. I have the pieces that I've shared with you. The sauna is my anchor, remember. It allows me to make sure that I've got my first dose of my minerals. It allows me the space for my spiritual practice. It allows me the space for a meditative practice. It allows me that first dosing, I'll call it, of my hydrogen and water. And then as I'm coming back in, the next piece is it puts me in line to have that morning green juice to get the day going. So all of those pieces, they all stem off of the sauna being my anchor. Now, in real life scenario, I don't use the sauna on Saturdays for a bunch of reasons. In this context, though, it's just given my body a day's rest from it. And I will say that it's probably 50-50 on the Saturdays, whether I actually consume a green juice or not. I will for sure still do the minerals and I'll for sure still do the hydrogenated water. But whether I do that green juice or not, that's a bit of a different story. Maybe, maybe not. So it makes a difference. But in a normal week, I go from there into my shower ritual. I've written about this and how I choose to shower, which is usually in the dark with a candle or some minimal amount of natural light. It helps me stay in that alpha brainwave a little bit longer. And it's one of the things that I shoot for is to really try to stay in the alpha space and only use beta when I need it. Most of us are stuck in beta, and think of the beta brainwave space as you are running your ass off from a lion that wants to eat you. The problem for most of us is that our nervous system is in that same fight and flight response when we're sitting on the couch watching a TV show with our loved ones, or we're sitting outside with a bunch of friends, our nervous system, we might not necessarily recognize it. This goes back to the whole understand what your normal is, but our nervous system is in this revved up state rather than having the ability to come back down and be a little bit more even keel. And this morning ritual, and the reason why I'm even recording this, is to really offer up, if nothing else, the moment that you can take a pause and go, wow, where are things and times and moments in my daily activity that I can restructure to give myself that space to come back down? Because let you on a little bit of a secret here. Part of shifting out of that 4 or 5 hour sleep rotation into the 6, 7.5 hour sleep rotation was actually addressing the piece that I'm talking about right here, which is teaching your nervous system how to stay more even keel rather than constantly be in this revved up state. This anchoring space really allows for that. So going into the shower, trying to maintain that alpha space, which is where I do a lot of my creative thinking and a lot of my processing from, and not having to do it from this fight or flight mechanism is huge. I then come out of shower and I go into my formal prayer practice for the day. That gives me that presence. It gives me that place of I am starting knowing that I'm not alone today and I have a bigger purpose and a different mission. And those are just a couple of pieces in my quote unquote morning anchoring routine that have huge carryover. And through that, it allows me to tap into a mindfulness practice as well. I'll often go from that, grab my decaf coffee or my tea, sit down for a couple minutes and just write and just unload some of the information out of my brain, which brings me to another piece that I speak about quite a bit. And in the upcoming memberships and workshops that I am putting together, this will be a cornerstone in them for sure. But I think that most people need to have some space, some system that they can use to capture information as they go about their days. And oftentimes I'll refer to this as what some of you might have heard known as the second brain. What is your second brain? See, most people think our brains are designed to actually be able to recall all these things that happen. And that's not totally true. Your unconscious mind does record all the things that's taking place on a daily basis, on a second to second moment, and it keeps them stored. But your conscious awareness is not designed to have this immediate retrieval. What it's designed to do, at least efficiently, is to cross-reference things. And you see, something out in the public and it reminds you of this thing that you recalled. And then you're in a conversation with somebody and they bring up a topic and you think to yourself, wait a second, I was just talking to someone else last week and they mentioned this and these two things connect. So our brains are great at connecting different experiences and different thoughts, but they are not great at storing information that we have at our beck and call as we need it. So creating that second brain system, huge. And what it has allowed me to do and other people that I've helped implement this is it gives you a knowing that whatever comes up, you can capture it somewhere and you can return to it later. And there is a sense of freedom that comes from that. There is this ability to just down regulate a little bit and not feel like you got to beat the hell out of yourself because you've not remembered this thing or that thing. I mean, how many people have something on a calendar, but they don't actually look at the calendar? They end up forgetting that they have this event and all of a sudden it was an extremely important event and they're going, oh man, like I totally forgot that. It's not because they didn't necessarily write it down, but they didn't have a system in place to come back to. Or if they did have that event, maybe there were things that were important to bring up during a meeting and those things were forgotten. Maybe there were things that came up during the meeting that you meant to put somewhere and you didn't. And for most of us, we actually don't mean to put them anywhere. We just think that we're going to hold them in our brain and we're going to remember later on the day or the next day or the next week, whatever information came up. And that's just not the reality. So having this second brain, it's huge. Like it's massive. And again, what it does is it allows you to externalize your thoughts and it allows you to free up mental space and mental bandwidth so that you can show up totally present and not have to struggle with this. Wait a second, wasn't there this and wasn't there that? There are different platforms, there are different systems. You can use paper and pen. I've been a bullet journaler for over a decade now, and you can use that for sure. And that's one of, I think, the secrets of the bullet journal is that it can act as this second brain space if you utilize it that way. But you can also go digital. I'd say that my second brain system, for those of you who've heard glimpses of it here and there, I use something called Obsidian, and that becomes truly my second brain vault, where it's my source of truth and topics and themes and things that come up. So it's one place. There's a bunch of information that pulls into that space that I can always turn to and find what it is I'm looking for. One of the secrets of having a quality second brain system is having information show up when you need it, where you need it. And that is where I feel we can really leverage technology to do these kinds of lifts for us versus having, let's say, something like Apple Notes. You might have 2,000 saved notes on your phone. Great. But do you have a system that quickly allows you to access the different things that you've put down in a meaningful way? That's what having a second brain does. It allows you to quickly access and reflect back on things so that you can learn from the past and you can then change the direction and course of your future. So second brain system, that is a huge one for me for sure. I already mentioned having that custom supplement stack. And for me, again, that's a powder. But knowing your hardware, and you've heard this many times, and the importance of that is what you have plenty of and what you don't have enough of, and then supplementing accordingly. That's what creates and fills in the gaps. I think that most people probably go into some kind of supplementation program thinking that it's going to act more like a nootropic. It's going to be this miracle grow that we sprinkle in there and just like life-changing, oh my gosh. And my experience has been that when you have dialed in your supplement stack, what it does is it helps you reset your new normal. And once you experience that new normal, for some people, it might be groundbreaking, but for most of us, it just becomes this quiet calm that allows us to start from a healthier place. So for me, having that custom stack, it really does tip the needle into a better place for me to show up through the day. Also, I've already mentioned hydrogen water. There's a whole bunch we can talk about there, but I will say this, knowing your hardware and knowing that I personally have an oxidation issue, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to reduce that oxidative stress. While there are many things that hydrogenated water these days, which is heavily researched or is in heavy research, is showing up, one of the places that it is showing profound differences is in helping oxidative stress. And with all the working out and all the exercise and the stress and everything else of creating and doing and business and helping and all these pieces, it's one of the things that I feel like, yeah, I'm willing to do that. Now, what I've noticed is that it definitely has improved sleep quality. It absolutely has improved GI motility. And believe it or not, I can use it almost as an excitatory space to help pick me up. So for example, if I'm hitting a day where at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm feeling kind of bogged down, which admittedly doesn't happen often, I can take a double shot of hydrogenated water and it will give me a caffeine-like effect. It has been, I think, 3 years now since I've kicked caffeine essentially, and I just don't use that as a stimulant anymore. That's coming from somebody that was drinking, I don't know, 3, 4 cups of coffee a day on a regular basis. So I find that the hydrogenated water actually can have that excitatory effect, and it helps me just pull me back into a focused state so that I can finish up the work that I had planned for the day. So those are a couple of tools. The last one that I will leave you with, and this is funny for a lot of you, it probably is going to make you laugh. And when I was thinking about the things that I use on a daily basis, and there's a lot more, it's been joked about for quite some time that I probably in some point should have been one of those YouTubers that actually does reviews on stuff. And who knows, maybe I will at some point. I for sure am a bit of a gear junkie and am always looking for the best tool for the job, not always the best stuff, but it is the best tool for the job. And it's just how I'm hardwired. I guess it's my human design as a 1-3 profile to go out there, do the research, find the information, pull it apart, and then come it back and share it with the masses so that they can benefit. But in all of that, one of the things that I've recently realized really shows up in my life on a daily basis are actually the ball canning jars, like the wide mouth ball jars, the little mason jars. Those things, I realize, especially when I look in the dishwasher, how many of them I go through in a day. They serve such tremendous purpose, and there's carryover into some of the environmental stuff that we'll get into in the upcoming mini series. But that's where I store all my juice. When I do a batch, I end up putting it into the mason jars and vacuum sealing them. They're great for smoothies. They're great for overnight chias and puddings and all these kinds of things. And if you do overnight oats, they're great for that. They're great for holding dressings and sauces. They actually even can double down as a measuring cup. How many times have you gone somewhere, maybe you've stayed in a vacation rental, and you're trying to find a decent measuring cup that's not plastic? It's for me, it happens all the time. But man, I probably have one of those stupid mason jars with me. And in that mason jar, it's actually graduated. There's measuring cup markings on it. And you're like, well, wait a second. You take those things with you? I do. And that's the beauty about having a powdered supplement, is I can just put that powdered supplement into that, put on a lid, seal her down, and off to the races I go. Even if I'm going for an extended period of time, I could just measure out the scoops of the powder, put it in, seal it down. Now I've got a whole dose for a week, let's say, that I can take with me. And it makes it super easy for sure. But back to the jars. So they're great. We even use them as cups. It was not the intention. I know I've been to many people's homes and they use them as cups. And I'm thinking like, what the heck? Really? You use these things? But I'm telling you, they become quite addictive over some period of time. And they're just great storage containers. They get you out of the plastic, which is always good, and they're easy. They're easy to replace. They're easy to wash. So it's one of the things that shows up on a regular basis. And I felt like, yeah, possibly all these things that I just shared. It's amazing how many of them come back to using these stupid little glass jars. If you're looking for a good storage solution or something that you can use for sauces and dips and things like this, get away from the plastic. That's a little bit of what's coming in future episodes, but using these little ball jars makes a huge difference. I think one of the other things that has a huge impact on how I show up in the day and through the week is doing a little bit of a pre-cook of prep foods. And it doesn't have to be crazy. There is an extended period of time that I was unable to do sweet potatoes, thinking that I had a sweet potato allergy, not realizing what the actual root cause of was the allergies. And for whatever reason, sweet potatoes would just fire it up even worse. But I am excited to be able to have sweet potatoes again. So I will typically do a batch roast, cut them in half, a little bit of olive oil in the glass pan, spread them around, lay out the sweet potatoes, into the oven they go, and I'll roast a batch. Those have become savings grace because as the day gets busy, it's so easy just to grab a half of a sweet potato, put a couple toppings on it if I want, and off to the races. As a matter of fact, this morning I just did a batch of a basil pumpkin seed pesto, and you can guess where that got stored into one of my handy trusty ball wide mouth jars. So taking the time to have a couple of things, whether it's cooking up, the batch of the chia pudding that I've shared all over the place, and you probably have seen recipes for that, whether it's doing something like a sweet potato prep, whether it's creating different sauces and condiments and things like that. Having a small window of doing some kind of food prep, it actually has a huge impact because now rather than snacking on a bunch of garbage, you know that you've got something that you can turn to very quickly. Frankly, I'm probably going to finish this recording, go downstairs, hook up a couple of eggs real quick, and top those eggs with that basil pesto that I was just talking about. So taking the short window of time to create a couple of these prepped foods so that you have them through the week, game changer in how you show up through the week. And then maybe lastly on the list is making sure that in some capacity, you are including some level of movement through your day. It might even just be a walk. Go for a walk in the park, go for a walk around the block, do something and get outside and get movement going, take in nature. These things all have an ability to help you downgrade from that sympathetic overdrive into a more parasympathetic state. And in combination, what they're doing is they're helping us set the deck in our favor to be able to have a more productive day. Wrap this episode up by saying this, going back to the beginning where we started. Remember, this isn't necessarily a productivity activity thing. It's more about how do you show up and have presence in your life? How do you regulate your nervous system before the world starts pulling you in all these different directions and the stressors of the day come in and hammer you? That's the goal, is to figure out how can you be proactive and shift out of this place of being forced into reactive. That is not the place you want to be. It is for sure always a better option. Proactive is the place to be. It's wanting to know that if you start to drift and your energy starts to drift and your mind starts to go awry and your digestion is all over the place, what are the things that you can use to pull you back into harmony? What are the things that you can use to pull you back into a space of you being present? With that, wish you all a great week. I look forward to speaking with you and sharing on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Thrive From Within, your journey, your way. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Connect with me and join the conversation over on Substack at the Proactive Pulse. You'll find deeper insights, tools, and reflections to support your journey. You can subscribe for free at proactivepulse.substack.com. I'd love to have you there. And if you know someone who needs this, share it forward. Until next time, keep aligning, keep thriving, and keep becoming more from within.